Get down on your knees and lick it clean. The venomous executive thought she was breaking a voiceless janitor. She had absolutely no idea the woman scrubbing shattered glass was the billionaire matriarch in disguise, and her ruthless, catastrophic revenge had just begun. The shattering illusion and the billionaire in disguise, the sickening crash of shattering glass violently pierced the hushed, sterile morning of the Apex Corporation's main lobby. Jagged shards exploded across the immaculate marble floor, but the sound was instantly eclipsed by a shrill, imperious voice dripping with visceral contempt. Are you completely blind? Or does your pathetic, toilet-scrubbing brain lack the sheer capacity to comprehend that these Jimmy Choo heels cost more than your entire year's salary combined? Get down on your knees and lick it clean. Right now, the camera of reality zooms in on the face of the woman spitting that venom. It was Veronica, the director of marketing. Her eyes were wide with a manic, power-hungry rage, her perfectly manicured finger pointed like a weapon at the face of a woman wearing a faded, pale blue janitorial uniform. The cleaner stood frozen, her head bowed in submission, unkempt hair falling forward to hide her eyes. Her bare, calloused-looking hands gripped the handle of a mop so tightly that her knuckles were entirely drained of blood. Passing employees averted their eyes, casting nervous, apathetic glances before quickening their pace. Not a single soul dared to step forward. Not one person was willing to risk their comfortable corporate existence to defend a voiceless nobody. But what the whispering crowd did not know, and what Veronica could not possibly fathom in her wildest nightmares, was that the woman slowly dropping to her knees to gather the broken glass was no bottom-tier subordinate. She was Rachel, the wife of the CEO, Christopher, the co-founder of the very empire they stood inside, and the core shareholder who held the ultimate strings of Apex's destiny. Beneath that cheap, chemical-stained uniform and the posture of absolute defeat was a woman of terrifying power, patiently and meticulously gathering the pieces of a grand, psychological theatrical play. Billionaire Bliss Audio warmly welcomes you to a story that will strip away the glamorous illusions of high society and expose the darkest corners of human nature. Before we dive into the chilling depths of this corporate espionage and marital betrayal, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Your support is the very heartbeat of this channel, giving us the motivation to continue bringing you gripping, emotionally raw narratives that you will not be able to stop listening to. To understand why a billionaire matriarch would willingly allow a middle management tyrant to trample her dignity in broad daylight, we have to rewind the clock to exactly 3 weeks ago. The flawless, magazine cover marriage between Rachel and Christopher had always been the ultimate symbol of elite romance. Yet, as with all things that glitter too brightly, invisible fractures had begun to spread beneath the surface. For 3 agonizing months, a suffocating chill had descended upon their sprawling mansion. Christopher began returning home long after the grandfather clock struck 2 in the morning, his clothes carrying the heavy, bitter scent of aged whiskey and an unfamiliar, lingering perfume. He avoided Rachel's eyes. He deflected her attempts at connection, retreating behind the heavy oak doors of his study, where he engaged in hushed, frantic phone calls. The tipping point of Rachel's mounting paranoia arrived on a rainy Tuesday. While searching for a document, she stumbled upon a crumpled invoice shoved deep into the darkest corner of Christopher's desk drawer. It was a receipt for an exorbitant sum, paid to the city's most ruthless private investigation firm. Attached was a hastily scribbled yellow sticky note. Jessica Whitmore, handle firmly before month's end. The intuition of a deeply in-tune wife, violently clashing with the sharp instincts of a seasoned businesswoman, set off deafening alarm bells in Rachel's mind. Was it infidelity? Was her husband being blackmailed? What catastrophic secret was the man she shared her life with desperately trying to bury? In any marriage, the most devastating sound is never the echoing screams of a fiery argument. It is the silence. Silence is an invisible dagger. It does not make you bleed out instantly. Rather, it slowly severs the microscopic threads of trust, letting the connection necrotize while leaving behind a vast, dark void for suspicion to breed. When a life partner abruptly erects an impenetrable emotional wall, the human brain instinctively fills those terrifying gaps with the worst possible scenarios. With her limitless resources, Rachel could have easily unleashed a pack of elite lawyers, kicked down her husband's office door, and demanded the truth. She could have orchestrated a high-society confrontation. But women of profound substance know a fundamental truth. You rarely find reality in face-to-face interrogations, where everyone has already rehearsed their lies and worn their defensive masks. The truth is only seen in its most naked, grotesque form when you observe it from the absolute bottom. Choosing to disguise herself as a janitor, the most invisible, undervalued caste in the corporate food chain, was a brutal but magnificent litmus test of character. Rachel did not just want to unearth the mystery of Jessica Whitmore or test her husband's fidelity. She wanted to borrow the eyes of a nobody to inspect the very soul of the empire she had built and to see the true faces of the parasites feeding off of it. Because when you possess no power, no status, and no wealth, the way people treat you is the only flawless mirror reflecting the exact ratio of humanity and monstrosity inside their hearts. The shadows of the corporate ladder. To fully grasp the magnitude of the rot festering within the company, we must return to that humiliating moment on the marble floor, where the disguised matriarch began connecting the sinister dots. As Rachel's bleeding fingers collected the final shards of Veronica's shattered glass, she did not feel the sting of physical pain, but rather the cold, electric thrill of a predator catching the scent of blood. The marketing director's venomous outburst was not merely the arrogance of a pampered executive. It was the frantic, hyper-defensive cruelty of someone desperately trying to project dominance to mask a profound, existential panic. Once the lobby cleared, Rachel quietly retreated to the service elevator, her mind a fortress of calculating precision. Being an invisible janitor granted her the ultimate skeleton key to the corporation. No one questions the woman emptying the trash bins at 8 in the evening. No one halts their hushed, conspiratorial conversations when the cleaning cart rattles past the boardroom doors. For the next 5 days, Rachel became a ghost haunting the very empire she owned, sifting through shredded documents and observing the subtle, nervous tics of the executive suite. Her relentless surveillance inevitably zeroed in on the phantom name from her husband's crumpled sticky note, Jessica Whitmore. Slipping into the human resources archive under the cover of darkness, Rachel bypassed the standard locks with a master code she herself had programmed a decade ago. The glow of her flashlight illuminated Jessica's file. She was not a glamorous mistress or a high-society seductress, but a 24-year-old junior compliance analyst who had been hired barely 8 months prior. According to the official records, Jessica had abruptly resigned 2 weeks ago due to personal health reasons. But the unofficial reality, buried deep within the metadata of the company's internal servers that Rachel hacked into from a custodial closet, told a deeply disturbing story. Jessica had stumbled upon a massive, sophisticated embezzlement ring siphoning millions from the international marketing budget, a budget entirely controlled by Veronica. The young analyst had meticulously compiled a digital dossier of ghost vendors, forged invoices, and offshore wire transfers. But before she could bring the evidence to the board, Jessica vanished, her digital footprint scrubbed, and her apartment abruptly vacated. Rachel stared at the glowing screen of her smuggled tablet, the harsh blue light reflecting in her hardened eyes. The crushing weight of the truth began to replace her marital paranoia. Christopher was not funneling vast sums of money to a private investigator to cover up a sordid affair. He was frantically hunting for a terrified, missing whistleblower before the predators within his own company could silence her permanently. Yet, as the pieces of the puzzle clicked together, a new, agonizing question arose to torment Rachel's logical mind. If Christopher had discovered this colossal betrayal by his most trusted executives, why had he shut his wife out? Rachel was the financial genius of Apex, the architect of their internal security protocols. Together, they had crushed corporate rivals and weathered catastrophic market crashes. So why, in the face of this internal sabotage, had the man who promised to share her every burden chosen to lock himself in a whiskey-soaked study, carrying the weight of the world entirely alone? The answer, as Rachel was about to discover, was rooted in a deeply twisted, tragic form of love that was rapidly tearing their empire apart. The web of deceit and the price of silence. The revelation of this financial sabotage transformed Rachel's creeping dread into terrifying clarity. shifting her husband's agonizing silence from a symptom of infidelity to a desperate shield of protection. To understand Christopher's isolation, Rachel needed to penetrate the heavily fortified walls of his daily operations, a task made laughably simple by her pale blue uniform. The following evening, she assigned herself to clean the executive suites on the top floor. As she methodically polished the brass fixtures outside Christopher's expansive office, the heavy oak door was slightly ajar. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Rachel paused, pressing her back against the cool wall, her breathing shallow as she listened to the muffled, strained voices echoing from within. "You are out of time, Christopher," a voice hissed. It was Julian, the chief financial officer, his tone dripping with a slimy, manufactured regret. "If the board catches wind of the missing marketing funds, the SEC will tear this building apart. And we both know whose signature is on those quarterly approval forms. Because you and Veronica buried the fraudulent expenditures under dummy subsidiaries that Rachel set up for the European expansion." Christopher's voice cracked, raw with exhaustion and suppressed fury. Rachel felt a physical blow to her chest. The dummy subsidiaries. She had established those shell companies years ago to legally minimize their international tax burden. Julian and Veronica had hijacked her brilliant financial architecture, turning it into a weapon. "Exactly," Julian replied, his voice smoothing out into a chilling purr. "The paper trail leads directly to your beloved wife. The moment Jessica Whitmore's little compliance report sees the light of day, Veronica and I will testify that Rachel orchestrated the entire embezzlement scheme. She will face federal prison, Christopher. Unless, of course, you sign over your controlling shares to our coalition and step down quietly. Call off your private investigator. Let Jessica disappear." Tears, hot and fiercely bitter, spilled over Rachel's eyelashes, tracking through the chemical dust on her cheeks. The profound tragedy of her husband's silence crashed over her like a tidal wave. Christopher was not cheating. He was bleeding out on a sacrificial altar of his own making. He had hired the ruthless private investigator to find Jessica first, hoping to secure her testimony and dismantle the conspiracy without dragging Rachel into the crosshairs of a federal indictment. He had built an emotional fortress of coldness and whiskey to keep her blissfully ignorant, believing that his total isolation was the only way to shield the woman he loved from complete destruction. But love, when laced with deception, is a poison that kills both the protector and the protected. Christopher's fatal flaw was underestimating the sheer, unyielding ferocity of the woman he had married. He viewed her as a treasure to be guarded, forgetting that she was the very dragon who had forged their mountain of gold. Leaning against the wall, her mop handle abandoned, Rachel wiped her face with the back of her calloused hand. The grief of suspected betrayal evaporated, instantly replaced by an icy, calculated wrath. Julian and Veronica had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They believed they were playing chess against an emotionally broken, isolated CEO. They had absolutely no idea that the true mastermind of Apex Corporation was currently standing just inches outside their door, holding the keys to their complete and utter annihilation. The resurrection of the matriarch armed with the agonizing truth of her husband's misguided sacrifice. The invisible janitor finally shed her chemical-stained uniform, resurrecting the ruthless titan who had built this empire from dirt. The time for silent observation had officially expired. Rachel did not return to the sprawling mansion she shared with Christopher. Instead, she commandeered a luxury suite at a downtown hotel under an alias, transforming it into a high-tech war room. If Julian and Veronica wanted to weaponize her own financial architecture against her, she would drown them in the very paperwork they thought they had mastered. She bypassed Christopher entirely, knowing that any sudden change in her behavior would alert the conspirators watching his every move. Drawing upon her limitless, untraceable personal wealth, Rachel initiated a shadow war. She quietly retained an elite, cutthroat legal firm operating out of Washington, D.C. Outsiders who could not be bought or intimidated by Apex's internal politics. She handed them the digital breadcrumbs she had extracted from the HR servers, unleashing a team of forensic accountants to trace the offshore wire transfers. Within 48 hours, they did what Christopher's private investigator had failed to do. They located Jessica Whitmore. The young analyst was hiding in a desolate motel in upstate New York, paralyzed by fear after receiving anonymous death threats. Rachel did not send an intermediary. She flew there herself via private helicopter in the dead of night. Sitting across from the trembling girl, Rachel did not offer corporate platitudes. She offered impenetrable, absolute protection, legally binding immunity, and a promise of vicious retribution against the people who had terrorized her. With Jessica secured and the irrefutable proof of Julian and Veronica's embezzlement meticulously documented, Rachel set her trap. The timing could not have been more poetic. The Apex Corporation's annual shareholder gala was scheduled for that Friday. It was the absolute pinnacle of corporate vanity, a night where the elite gathered to toast their own brilliance beneath cascading crystal chandeliers. Veronica was slated to receive the Innovator of the Year award, a sickeningly ironic accolade meant to solidify her untouchable status before the planned coup against Christopher. As the evening of the gala approached, Rachel stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror of her hotel suite, undergoing her final transformation. The pale blue, chemical-stained uniform was gone, replaced by a breathtaking, custom-tailored crimson gown that fit like liquid armor. Her unkempt hair was styled into a sleek, intimidating crown, and her eyes, once cast downward in mock submission, burned with the predatory glow of an apex predator ready to strike. She slipped a diamond necklace around her throat, each stone cold and hard, just like the heart she required for the night ahead. She had allowed herself to be stepped on, verbally spat upon, and erased into the background, all to measure the true depths of the monsters residing in her home. The disguise had served its brutal purpose. Tonight, the invisible janitor would die, and the queen would reclaim her throne in a spectacle of fire and ruin. The shattering retribution and the echoes of truth, the meticulously arranged stage was finally set for a merciless reckoning, one that would echo through the glass corridors of Apex Corporation and forever shatter the illusions of those who thought they held the power. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of bespoke tuxedos and blinding diamonds, humming with the arrogant laughter of the untouchable elite. Near the podium, Christopher stood like a hollow shell of the man he once was, his face pale, his eyes darting anxiously toward the exits. Beside him, Veronica practically vibrated with triumphant glee, her diamond-encrusted Jimmy Choo heels clicking sharply against the polished floor as she prepared to accept her award and initiate the final phase of their extortion. Just as Julian stepped up to the microphone to introduce her, the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom violently swung open, slamming against the walls with a sound like a thunderclap. The string quartet abruptly faltered into silence. The sea of elites parted instinctively. Walking down the center aisle, flanked by 4 imposing federal agents and the top litigator in the country, was Rachel. The collective gasp in the room was palpable, but the look of absolute, paralytic horror on Veronica's face was a masterpiece. As Rachel approached the stage, her gaze briefly locked with Christopher's. In that fleeting second, his mask of desperate isolation crumbled, replaced by a profound, tear-filled realization that he had never needed to protect her. He only needed to trust her. Rachel did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. Stepping up to the podium, she gently moved a sweating, trembling Julian aside. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice slicing through the dead silence like a scalpel. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate innovation. And I must admit, the ingenuity required to siphon $42 million into offshore accounts using forged compliance signatures is quite extraordinary." She pressed a button on the remote in her hand. The massive screens behind her, meant to display Veronica's promotional reel, suddenly flashed with damning bank statements, audio transcripts of Julian's blackmail, and a live-stream video of Jessica Whitmore sitting safely in an FBI field office, holding up her original, unedited report. Chaos erupted. The glamorous facade of the gala instantly dissolved into a frenzy of panicked whispers and shouting. Veronica, her face drained of all color, stumbled backward, her expensive heels betraying her as she collapsed onto the very floor she had once demanded a janitor lick clean. You were the cleaner," Veronica whispered, her mind finally connecting the piercing eyes of the billionaire matriarch to the woman she had mercilessly degraded weeks prior. Rachel looked down at her, her expression entirely devoid of mercy. And you, Veronica, are nothing but trash. And I have always excelled at taking out the garbage. As federal agents stepped forward to place Julian and Veronica in handcuffs, reading them their rights over the din of flashing press cameras, Christopher broke through the crowd. He pulled Rachel into a desperate, crushing embrace, burying his face in her shoulder. The invisible dagger of silence that had nearly severed their marriage was finally pulled free. In the quiet aftermath of the storm, as the ruined executives were hauled out into the flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers, Rachel learned the ultimate lesson of true power. Wealth and status are merely costumes we wear to convince the world of our worth. But the true measure of a person's soul, whether they are a tyrant or a titan, is only revealed when the illusion of power is entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but the raw, unvarnished truth of how they treat those who have absolutely nothing. The breathtaking saga of Rachel and Christopher serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of true leadership and the catastrophic consequences of deceit. By shedding her billionaire status and donning the uniform of an invisible janitor, Rachel successfully infiltrated the dark underbelly of her own empire. She uncovered a truth that was far more complex than marital betrayal. A desperate husband sacrificing himself to protect her from a sinister corporate coup engineered by greedy, ruthless executives. The climax at the gala was not just an act of vengeance. It was the ultimate restoration of justice and a masterclass in strategic brilliance. Veronica and Julian, blinded by their own arrogance and perceived invincibility, failed to realize that true power does not reside in titles, designer clothes, or corner offices. It resides in one's character, intellect, and the quiet observation of those often deemed invisible. Rachel's journey from a humiliated cleaner to a conquering matriarch illustrates that the foundation of any unbreakable bond, be it in marriage or business, must be built on absolute trust and open communication, rather than misguided, silent sacrifices. Ultimately, the story leaves us with a profound realization. The masks we wear can hide our wealth and status, but they can never conceal our true nature. When the glittering chandeliers shatter and the applause fades, all that remains is the undeniable truth of how we treat the vulnerable, proving that character is the only currency that truly survives in the end. The profound lesson: true character is not defined by how you interact with those who hold power over you, but by how you treat those who have absolutely nothing to offer you. Arrogance and cruelty are often the loudest signs of inner weakness, while true strength lies in humility, vigilance, and the ability to listen. Furthermore, in relationships, even the most well-intentioned silence can become a destructive weapon. True partnership requires facing storms together, rather than building walls to shield the other in isolation. How to apply this to your life? Practice radical empathy. Treat the janitor with the exact same level of respect as the CEO. Make a conscious effort to acknowledge and value the invisible people in your daily life: service workers, assistants, and strangers. Your personal integrity is measured by these everyday interactions. Communicate through the hardship. If you are facing a massive burden or crisis, do not shut out your partner or loved ones to protect them. Vulnerability and shared problem-solving strengthen relationships, whereas secrecy, even with the best intentions, breeds paranoia and fractures trust. Observe quietly before reacting. When faced with a suspected betrayal or a sudden crisis, do not rush to emotional conclusions. Take a step back, gather the facts, and observe the situation objectively. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to remain silent, listen closely, and strategize before making your next move. A question for you: if you were in Christopher's position, would you have kept the dangerous secret to protect your spouse, or would you have told her immediately so you could fight the battle together? Please share your perspective in the comments section below so we can all discuss and learn from each other's viewpoints. If you enjoyed this story and found value in its message, please subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the incredible motivation to keep creating more captivating and meaningful content for you.